Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Arasik, for that extremely complex picture that you have drawn out of Northeast Asia. Clearly the last remaining theatre of Cold War, I would say. I wonder what people here might make of your view that the nuclearization has actually been good for China. So that really comes
Right. That's great.
But that's an interesting position you took. So I now request Last Division Open to make his presentation. His interesting contribution to the hallowed portals of South Block, I'm told, was Latino music when he was there. So I think there will be some interesting presentation.
I guess the topic of Latin America's amigovio relationship with China needs an explanation, a Latino explanation. An American country music singer, Lee Ann Oman, has a song, 20 years and 2 husbands ago. 20 years and 2 husbands ago. It's based on the personal life story of 2 failed marriages. You can imagine the lyrics. She swears she will never again fall in for another wedding ring and end up suffering. Latin America has gone through a similar experience. Not 2 marriages, but 1.5 marriages. One full-fledged formal marriage, another one what the Latinos call más o menos marriage. It's more or less marriage. The first marriage was to Europe, to Spain and Portugal for 300 years. When Napoleon overran Spain and Portugal, the Latin Americans could declare the marriage is void, my husband is missing, and declared independence. But this independence was short-lived. In 1823, a macho from the north came in announcing Monroe Doctrine and claimed más o menos marriage with the Latin America, claiming possession and control, and abused the region in the name of wars on communism, drugs, and the latest war on corruption. It went on for about 180 years. Now, in the 21st century, Latin America has reinvented itself, become democracies from dictatorship, turned around the economies, and become assertive. So I asked a Brazilian friend of mine, what happened to your más o menos marriage with the North? He told me a story. Exxon, the big hat, came to Rio de Janeiro, walked in the beach Ipanema, and found a garota de Ipanema, the girl from Ipanema, fell in love with her, proposed marriage, married, and took her to Boston, and the first day in the evening, so the Exxon calls the Brazilian wife and says, hey, come here. I'll explain to you the 3 rules of our marriage. Number 1, I am the boss. Number 2, I will do anything I like, go wherever I like, no questions. Number 3, as and when I come back, whether it is 2 in the morning or 3, food should be ready, warm, on the table, and you should be there to serve it. So this Brazilian garota said, Si, senor, no problem. You have any questions? He said, yeah, I have. Since you have put 3 conditions, I have one small condition. What's that? So the Brazilian looks at him and says, you see the bedroom there? There will be sex every night at 9 o'clock, whether you are there or not. So that is the state of marriage with the macho in the north. Now, it was at this inflection point, turning point, transformation, China came in as a new suitor with a very large dowry, cash, credit, investment. So the Latinos told the Chinese, no te prometo amor eterno, porque no puedo. Soy un cazador de mariposas, tripulante de nubes. I don't promise you eternal love because I cannot. I am a hunter of butterflies and flyer in the clouds. So the Latin Americans proposed a new form of relationship, and that is amigovio. Amigovio means amigo, friend, novio, so between the two, which means no possession, no control, no dominance, no surrender, no emotion, no commitment, no declaration of fidelity. There is an Argentine TV serial called Amigovio, which came in 1995. And there is a Hollywood film of Justin Timberlake, Friends with Benefits, which came in 2011. Now, let me tell you the dowry which came from China. Trade. The Chinese have become the second largest trading partner of Latin America, overtaking European Union. And they are the largest trading partner for Brazil, Chile, and Peru. The trade last year was $215 billion, of which 113 was Chinese exports, 102 imports. And in fact, it was $264 billion in 2014. Now, the Chinese have announced that this would be taken to $500 billion by 2025. Now, it is not just a commercial transaction. The Chinese import of large volumes of commodities from Latin America increased the prices, and it was a windfall for Latin America. The copper price, for example, rose from $1,000 to $8,000 per ton. The iron ore from $50 to $180. So the dollars were raining in South America. And this was used for the pro-poor policies to bring out 50 million people out of poverty line. Now, this Chinese large imports and giving dollars to Latin America was the most crucial part for the turnaround of Latin America into 21st century Latin America with a new paradigm of growth. In fact, they call the first decade as the decade of growth, in contrast to the last decade during the Washington Consensus times in 1980s. But for China's large imports, Latin America would not have been able to turn around like this so quickly. Now, credit. Till January 2017, China has given a credit of $141 billion, of which $100 billion is going to energy, about $24 billion to infrastructure. The largest is to Venezuela, $62 billion. Brazil, $57 billion. Ecuador, $17 billion. Argentina, $15 billion. Even Bolivia, $3.5 billion. But here again, it is not the commercial part of credit which is important. For Latin America, what was important was that it was rescue at desperate times for some countries. And China was the lender of last resort. when Argentina declared default in 2002, the Washington Consensus Mafia ganged up against Argentina, and they would not allow them access international capital finance. They were shut up. It was China which came to their rescue. In fact, the vulture funds, when they cut the $100 to $30 as part of debt restructuring, 98% of the creditors had agreed to the 30% cut because still they made money. But 2% of the vulture, 2% of the creditors, who are the vulture funds, they were harassing Argentina to an unimaginable extent. Once they got an Argentine naval ship impounded in Ghana, and the Argentine President Cristina Kirchner never went by her own aircraft to anywhere because there was the fear that it might be impounded. Now, Brazil, when it went through this car wash crisis, started in 2014, the Wall Street guys wanted to drive the bonds and shares of Petrobras the lowest so that they can make a killing. And Petrobras needed $10 billion urgently to pay off some bond. It was China which came and gave $10 billion. And Venezuela, which got the $62 billion, it would have collapsed long back but for the Chinese credit to Venezuela. Investment. Till January 2017, the estimate is $110 billion, of which 80% has come from state-owned enterprises, and most of it through Cayman Islands and the usual routes. $61 billion out of this $110 billion have gone to Brazil. While in the beginning, the investment had gone mostly to energy and mining, in the last couple of years, utilities and services sector have attracted 50% of the Chinese investment. For example, the Chinese have invested in the power sector in Brazil $7 billion. Power stations, transmission lines, and the whole grid network. The Chinese have come out with some mega projects. One is called Bioceanic Railway from Rio de Janeiro to the Peruvian, connecting Atlantic and Pacific. $5 billion. And more interestingly, Nicaragua Canal Project, $50 billion. If it materializes, it would be the largest construction project in contemporary world. Now, these are statements to Latin America that China is coming in as a constructive development partner, whereas the other one, across, is coming out with a destructive agenda of wars and terrorism, discovering terrorism in Mexico and Paraguay and Brazil. So, this is the message they want to give to the Latin American people. Despite this large dowry, Latin America has, with their experience of the last 17 years of China's presence, they have discovered some of the downsides. Number one, they found that China also behaved like the previous husbands. Like, for example, when Argentina imposed anti-dumping duty on a few goods worth a few $1 million from China, the Chinese wanted to teach them a lesson. They stopped the import of soya oil from Argentina. Argentina is the largest exporter of soya oil in the world, and China at that time was importing something close to $3 billion. It is cutting and brought it down to about $300 million. Of course, we went in because the prices were good. And in Brazil, when Vale, the mining company, they built this big ships called Vale Max, like super tankers carrying millions of tons of iron ore, which can be delivered cheaply to the Chinese. They can produce cheap steel and destroy the Brazilian steel industry. But when the construction had already started and when they were about to start, the Chinese said, oh no, the Vale Max ships cannot come to China. Environmental implications or technical problems. In 2009, you might remember the H1N1 virus, Mexico. The Mexicans were treated like dirt by China. And the Mexicans felt more humiliated than by the one across. Second, the flooding of Chinese goods have hurt the domestic industry. Thousands of factories have closed down in Latin America. And the third, the Chinese started scaring the Latin Americans. When a Chinese entrepreneur came to Rio Negro province in Argentina and wanted to buy 400,000 hectares of land. He had gone, stand on a hill and said, I want to buy the whole thing. So the South Americans started imposing restrictions on acquisition of land by foreigners. And also they fear some kind of hidden agenda. There are also, besides legal migrants, there are so many illegal immigrants. In Buenos Aires, in and around the greater Buenos Aires, there are about 10,000 Chinese shops, supermarkets, neighborhood shops. And they only know pesos and the numbers, and they don't speak Spanish, many of them. They are first generation Chinese. And of course, the last is the cultural and communication. The Latin Americans, they have a word in Spanish called puente chino, which literally in Spanish means Chinese story. But between us, it means bullshit. Now, the Nicaragua Canal project, why it is a dazzling, large project, the Latin Americans look at it and say, what is there? You know, Nicaragua is ruled by the Marxist Ortega, and he refuses to recognize China. He recognizes only Taiwan. Now, in that country, you are going to invest $50 billion, and the guy, the billionaire who is going to invest on Beijing, he has no experience in construction, he is in some telecom, his assets came from $10 billion to $1 billion. And you can't do a $50 billion project by a single entrepreneur. You need the state behind it. So the Latin Americans say, Nicaragua Canal, it's a puente chino. Now, the Latin Americans have decided that they should reduce their over-dependence on China and minimize the risk. And that is where India comes. In 2014, India was the third largest destination of Latin American exports. $40 billion after US and China. In 2016, India was the sixth largest destination, ahead of any European country. Exports to India was $16.7 billion. Exports to Germany, 14.4. To Spain, $13.5 billion. To UK, $10 billion. France and Italy, less than $10 billion. So they see India as a large growing market and a new partner. And they are comfortable with Indian culture. Yoga, meditation, gurus. I just give you two examples of French. The Latin Americans have taken Indian spiritualism to a new level. In Buenos Aires, there is a nightclub, there is a band called Yoga Rave which plays. But it's a new kind of nightclub. There are about 600-700 young adolescents there. But this Yoga Rave group sings in pure Sanskrit. Of course, they use hip hop, but pure Sanskrit. And when they play, there is no non-vegetarian food, no alcohol, no smoking, and no etc. And in between the songs, there's a guy who comes and asks people to do meditation, yoga, and so on. In India, my son says, you have reached the age of yoga. But the Latin Americans have taken yoga and meditation and Sanskrit to a young generation, adolescent teens in nightclub, which you can't do in India. The second example, there's a Brazilian called Fernandes de Oliveira from Sao Paulo. You know those typical stereotype Brazilian who dances samba in carnival and drinks a beer called Brahma beer. It's a popular brand in Brazil, Brahma beer. He married at the age of 33. For his honeymoon, he came to India. He went to Rishikesh. Everything changed. He found a guru and he stopped drinking Brahma beer and started drinking Ganga Jal. He renounced his marital status, left his wife, became a sannyasi, and joined a Sachadam ashram in Rishikesh. And they have anointed him as the 5th guru of Sachadam ashram. And Fernandes de Oliveira has become Sri Prem Baba. Thank you.
Thanks, Master Vishwanathan, scintillating as ever. But I think it's very good depiction of the rather mixed kind of picture about the Chinese role in the different regions, and I think that was brought out very well. Friends with benefits, sure, but there are a whole lot of unintended consequences, and those are very well brought out. Though I'm not too sure whether switching from Brahma beer to Ganga Jal is such a good idea. I mean, given the state that we in. But now, with those wonderful 4 presentations, I'm going to request the organizers to give us 10 more minutes so that we can have 20 minutes of Q&A. So I had said 10 minutes, which would take us to 5:40. 10 minutes for Q&A, so can I take 10 more minutes? No. It's not fair, 4 people out here, and the next session in any case has only 2. Yeah. You're right, I'm the chair. Okay, so floor is open to... Yes, it's open. I recognize you first.
Thank you for an excellent panel. Ambassador Raghavan, just to check about the admission of South Africa to BRICS. You said the Chinese got them to BRICS. I mean, true, the Hainan meeting decided to admit them, but the IFSA forum was already there. The RIC in an informal way was already functioning, and therefore the joining of South Africa to BRICS was, you'd know better, so I would like to know whether that's the thing, that the Chinese got the South Africans to BRICS. That's one. The